Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to tonight's Virtual Enterprise Ethereum Alliance London meetup. I'm Connor Svensson. I'll be your host during the session here today. I'm now going to introduce Adam Clarke. So Adam Clarke, he's the CTO of Finality.
Thank you, Connor. That's a very kind introduction. I appreciate that. Well, Connor's just setting me up. As he said, I'm Adam Clarke, CTO at Fnality. I've been involved in the Finality program for a couple of years now, in various guises. But I'll go spend the next sort of 20 minutes or so taking you through Finality and the technology and the things that we've been doing there, specifically around some of our principles, and then the technology around how we see the EEA and the importance of decentralized systems and certainly open standards as well. Great, so here we go. Finality at a glance. So as Connor introduced, basically we've, as an organization, we've been around for a while, but Finality itself was founded in May 2019. It was a consortium product of a number of the banks you see here. Previous to that, where for about 3.5 years, it was a consortium project looking at exactly this problem. We got its Series A funding in May 2019 in order to take this to the next level. And to say that was at a £47 million raise for us, which was an awesome raise. And you can see the founding investors there as well. So we have the backing of some serious sort of tier 1 investment banks and globally systemic investment banks. And effectively, what we're trying to do is to build a new peer-to-peer payment system. We are just a payment system. That is clearly the point of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that we build a payment system for effectively cross-border payments in near real time, and we're trying to effectively reduce a lot of risk. And I'll go through each of those points in a little bit more detail as I talk. But basically we work in wholesale money, so we work in central bank money. And to dispel a few myths of Finality, right up front, we're not a stable coin, we're not a cryptocurrency. We don't do anything like that. We are actually tokenizing fiat currency, but purely for the point of being a payment system, and allowing participants of the system to transfer value of wholesale money between themselves. So it's just very clear we're not a stable coin or a cryptocurrency as such. Okay. So why do we exist? What is Finality and what's it all about? Well, the front office of big investment banks has been bludgeoning. It's going very well for the last 20 years. Like it's you've got almost real-time FX. You've got loads of things going on front office, and it's grown very fast because it's where it makes money. It's the interesting bit of the investment bank. But the back end of the system has got to basically settle that money and deal with all of the problems that are there. It hasn't had the same investment over time that the front office has, so it's very much behind. And it's got a number of very serious sort of issues or backs up that need to be solved. And they're kind of listed here. So firstly, kind of rapid reducing margins. We know the pressure on banks has been massive recently. Capital requirements have gone up, various different financial crises. It's very difficult to make money and to continue to drive margins with investment banking. Liquidity is everywhere with all sorts of counterparties, and it's very difficult to hold liquidity in a single place and manage it. Sweeping money around the world day to day is a big industry, and there's a lot of people involved in doing that within the banks. Complex and costly risk management, again, similar thing. How do you make sure you've got all the money in the right place at the right time? How do you manage the risks of covering all of your positions, etc. And then the army of people that it requires to actually do post-trade settlement is massive. And with all these things happening, with the various pressures on the financial industry, there's been massive uptick in the regulatory requirements around capital controls, capital management, etc. So it's a big area that we could solve a lot of problems in, and Finality believe we can make a really good inroad into that. And we want to do that doing what we effectively call distributed financial market infrastructure, which is building a payment system based on Ethereum. And I'll explain why. So how do we do this? What we're trying to do is we are trying to remove a bunch of the third parties involved in the system. So at the moment, banks will hold a lot of money with counterparties, either in a single currency or cross-border. That involves risk. That involves a lot of counterparty risk. You've got to ring fence money on your balance sheet to cover your positions. And it's very difficult to manage that liquidity. You've got to move it backwards and forwards between third parties. What we try to do is to remove that third party risk by creating a much more controllable, manageable single pool of liquidity, actually under the control of the organization that owns it, rather than sitting out with counterparties. We reduce costs by ensuring that post-trade settlement is fast, efficient, and without error, and done in a way that is agreed by the whole participating network through consensus. We want to widen access to central bank money eventually, make sure that people can use it, make sure people can use the Finality payment system. And then the key one really for us is reducing risk, getting counterparty risk lowered, and therefore systemic risk lowered across the various different parts of the financial institutions. Cool. So key design principles for Finality. The key thing about using a blockchain for us is not that we're using a blockchain. In fact, we could have, to do what we're trying to do here, we could have just used a normal database, an Oracle database or something like that. But we've got a set of very important decentralization principles as far as we're concerned. And these, together with the technology, actually make up the philosophy of Finality. Effectively, what we're trying to do is to create a digital representation of money held at the central bank. So basically, it's pre-funded payment system. So if you want to use the Finality payment system as a participant, you fund the system by moving money into our central bank account. Excuse me. We tokenize that money, and we transfer the value and the asset of that token back to you. So it sits on your balance sheet, and it's got similar. So it has similar credit risk as central bank money. It's just a tokenization of central bank money. Our aim then is to have it available in multiple currencies. So not just in one GBP or in US dollar. 5 initially is our target. And what that means is that we can facilitate almost instant cross-border payments. So you can move money around the world very quickly, instead of it taking a couple of days to settle, reducing settlement and counterparty risk, because it's always sitting on your balance sheet. And this one's really important because this opens up all sorts of new world market ways of working, where you can do intraday FX swaps with settlement finality, etc. And it's our blockchain implementation, or our Ethereum implementation, that's doing that. And I'll come on to why that is in a minute. And then interoperable. We want to be a payment system. So we are the payment rails effectively in central bank money. And then we're going to build an ecosystem out where we will allow interoperation with all sorts of other business products or business platforms and venues, so that we can do multi-currency payment versus payment, and then eventually delivery versus payment. So swapping assets for money. And to be able to do that globally around the world, linked into all sorts of new venues, all sorts of new different business ventures and things like that, will mean that we need some pretty seriously open and interoperable systems. And again, one of the reasons why we're kind of really keen on the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance is because we want that open interoperability available to us. Okay, so onto the technology a little bit. Why are we using a blockchain? Well, the reason for using a blockchain is to get to a decentralized system, and I'll come on to more decentralization later. But effectively, we're using four elements, as I would like to explain in the technology stack at the moment. We start at the bottom with Ethereum, and it's the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance basically stack. And we believe that open standard is a really, really important one for what we're doing. At the moment, we sit Hyperledger basically on top of that as our Ethereum client. That's one of the clients that we know is growing with the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance open standards. But we want to open that up. So one of the reasons we're really interested in client interoperability within the EEA is to make sure that any client that actually is spec compliant over time will be able to be a part of the Finality payment system. So as participants join the system, as the network grows, we want the actual participant to be able to decide which client they want to use, which commercial support construct they want to have, and allow them to basically pick and choose. And the really important thing about that is that decentralizing not just the technology, but decentralizing at the way that we do things with third parties, with organizations helps as well. If we just have one client available to everyone, then we've got, a 0-day vulnerability comes up in that client, we've got a problem. Or if everyone is using that one particular client, and there's a significant defect that stops consensus working, for example, in an update, then the whole of the Finality payment system stops. So we really care about those open standards. But basically, it's doing us really, really well. We're starting with that. It's a great client, and the consensus guys are obviously working really hard on coming up to the open standards that the EEA are working on. On top of that, at this moment in time, we have the IBFD2 algorithm for consensus, so proof authority. That is the Hyperledger Basic standard. I know that the EEA are working hard, and now Quorum has gone into the consensus organization to create a new version of the IBFT protocol. So we'll watch that with interest, and we may very well move to that as we get the specs open and more clients can implement them. And then finally, the kind of important bit at the top of the stack for us is the tokenization asset. So we're using an implementation of ERC 2020 to tokenize the assets. It's the e-money token, has a lot of the characteristics that we needed to effectively tokenize and central bank money. And that's working well for us. Well, we've got an implementation of that we will likely open source later on in the process. And it means that we can, we're sticking to a standard that we can help to feed back into and grow as time goes on. That's kind of the high level stack. There's a lot of things that sit around the outside of it, a lot of smart contracts that manage things like permissioning, access to the private network, and privacy, dealing with things that you have to do in a payment system, like the end of day end of day statements and value date and moving things on, etc. But they all sit around the outside as sort of functionality. But this is our main stack, if you like. Okay, so a real quick one on why we picked Ethereum, and this is a really interesting conversation because this comes up a lot when we talk to people. Why did we go with an Ethereum Enterprise Alliance client, and why do we think that Ethereum Enterprise Open Standards is the way forward? Well, we looked at the public Ethereum network, and really the problem with that is getting it past the regulators from a proof of work perspective, and also from getting to what we call the legal settlement finality is a real problem on the public Ethereum network. We looked at Hyperledger Fabric as well. And it wasn't. It's a great platform. It's just not truly decentralized in the way that we want to be. Because if you look at the Finality payment system, we want all of our participants to run the nodes. Finality itself will not run validation nodes at all. We don't want the ability to validate because that gives us the ability to both run validation in the network and permission onto the network, which, as far as we're concerned, is a bit of a toxic combination. That's not true decentralization. So Finality will never run on validator nodes. The validator nodes will be run by our participants, and therefore truly decentralized. And we couldn't do that with Fabric or indeed Corda. Corda needs the presence of a notary that acts as effectively as a validating agent. And so again, that would mean a single point of control within the organization or within the ecosystem, and we really we want to avoid that. Okay, moving on. So just a sort of an overview of why we think this is beneficial for people that are using the system. I think this is a really important one. Interoperability is core. We'll basically want to support, be the payment rail for all sorts of new markets, existing markets and legacy systems as well. So interoperability with other blockchains and legacy systems through our protocols will be a massively important part of building our ecosystem. Privacy. We're only a payment system. We don't actually store any client information or any of the payment information on chain. The actual agreements between parties that are making payments sit within the venues or between the parties themselves. So we keep the minimum amount of data on chain possible. Keeps the chain small, but it also means that we don't have data that can be misused sitting on chain. Security, really important. Obviously, for a payment system, we need to make sure that you can't get access to it unless you've been permissioned to do it. And obviously, it's a private permission DLT. But we basically have a number of smart contracts that sit on top for permissioning and management. And then we provide software to the participants to do signing for messages on chain. So it's a very secure and managed process. And I'll talk a little bit more about the resilient side in a second. Distributed architecture, because it's DLT, because Finality are not running any of the validator nodes. The validator nodes are sitting out with our participants, and we're going to encourage them to execute diversely. So what we don't want is for 15 banks to be attached to this system, and they've all decided that they're going to run their validator node in availability zone 1 in the London region of AWS. Right, that's going to cause us a problem because we now have a single point of failure in Amazon Web Services. So our idea is basically we step back from that and we make sure that there's a set of diversity, but each of the banks running the nodes are effectively not a single point of failure. We've got enough nodes out there to manage, and they're running in different places. Some may do on-prem, some will do cloud, some will do some sort of hybrid, and that means that we're effectively not involved in that process as Finality. And that is true peer-to-peer, right? If what we're talking about is a peer-to-peer network where Finality is involved only in the legally required parts of running a payment system, such as permissioning and getting people on and off the chain. Okay, so the distributed architecture was one of the key ones that we were talking about. So we ensure resilience by making sure there are no single points of failure within the ecosystem, not just technology, but in people, in processes, and organizations. So again, not running everything in Amazon Web Services, making sure that organizations are running different parts of our network and having all of the relevant processes in place to make sure that is all distributed and there are no toxic combinations of roles within the process. And doing that, obviously, as I said, it reduces the attack services. It kind of improves uptime through diversity. If we've got 4 different operating systems running nodes out there, a zero-day vulnerability is much less likely to cause us an issue than it would be if we were running everything on a single Linux distribution, for example. And no one, because it's distributed in this way properly without anyone owning or running more than 33% of the nodes on the network, we absolutely guarantee that it's very difficult to influence the network. You'd have to penetrate and control nodes in a number of systemically important financial institutions, which would make it very, very difficult. And then finally, basically, we'll have a governance layer in place that sits across the top of all of the Finality payment systems that sit globally, and just make sure that all of the cross-border payments are working properly, but again, no influence over the network. That will be sitting with the participants themselves. Okay, and I guess this brings me on to my kind of final point on this. We really care about the EEA. The EEA is really important to us, and we're going to put more and more effort into the EEA over time as we get closer to our go lives. So effectively, open standards, I've covered the point a couple of times, but I really want to make it clear. The real important part for us is that removing single points of failure is important to us. So Having multiple clients that can attach to our network means that we get that diversity. And it provides innovation as well. When there are open standards, when people can adopt them, we find that people will adopt and use things more and get involved, and hopefully that will drive the adoption of the Finality payment system in total. So I think that was kind of all I really wanted to cover. But at a summary, we're building a global payment system based on fiat currency and open standards around Ethereum. And the key things that we've done over the last few years is prove the technology works, but got to the legal point where we can persuade regulators and global banks that actually we're able to tokenize central bank money. We're able to operate the payment rails for these venues in a sensible and secure way that is legal as well, that meets all of the regulations for running financial market infrastructure and for things like the legal settlement finality, or the settlement finality directive around the safe and legal exchange of money. So it's a great start for us. We're in the process of building this out at the moment. We've got test networks and banks connected up to test networks, and we are running a load of tests. And then we're hoping that we'll have our first payment system in the first currency live, within months, effectively. So it's a great start for us. It's a great honor to be a part of the EEA. And I'm personally very grateful for being part of the Tech Spec working group and helping to drive that forward. And yeah, I think hopefully we'll be back one of these in a year or so's time, showing you how the system is actually working in the world. And as Connor says, I think this is genuinely a really good use case for picking up on the EEA spec and using DLT in the way that we are. Okay. That was all I really wanted to cover. Do we have any questions?
One question from David Gordon, which is what's the relationship between Finality and central bank digital currencies?
No, that's a very good question. So I guess you could class us as a synthetic central bank digital currency. The thing with central bank digital currency is the idea is they tend to be actually provided by and run by central banks. That's been talked about a lot in the way of talking retail money, commercial bank money, up until now, but it's years away in fiat currency or central bank money. In fact, it hasn't really been spoken about for a while. So we hope to be the effectively the de facto way of tokenizing central bank money as a synthetic CDBC.
Another question, is the smart contract data encrypted on chain by Money Pillai?
Is the data encrypted on chain? No, we're open. We don't have any privacy or implementation of any kind of additional privacy or obfuscation. Mainly because we don't need to. We're only, I mentioned earlier, we're only storing a very, very light level of data on chain. There's no personal information. There's only the transactional data. And actually, having spent quite a lot of time analyzing that, there's not enough information really on chain to be useful to anyone in a way to exploit it commercially or otherwise.
Okay. Question from Richard Foster. What's the availability of the open source code for firms that want to build on top of Finality? Solutions.
Great question. Yeah. So we will basically, the idea being that for organizations that want to build a venue like an FX venue or a commodities trading venue on top and use the Finality payment system as a payment rail, we will, when we're live and we're driving use cases, we will make available the protocol in which to interoperate with the Finality payment system, and that's effectively the way that you would exchange proofs, if you like, that the payment has been made cross-chain, and that will be available to business partners as they sign up to use the Finality payment system. So it will never be a truly open network. You will have to have some sort of commercial relationship with Finality to be able to run on top of the chain. It's not a public network in the way that the public Ethereum is.
Question from Osman: as Finality, do you have an account with the central banks?
That is the idea. We're working with the central banks at the moment, and indeed we've been talking to the central banks for a number of years. In order to make this work, we need to hold a system account with the central banks, which allows organizations to move money into our account so that we can tokenize it and provide the legal ownership of those tokens back to the participants.
A question from Mani Pillay: will it be open for fintech firms to connect and test? Which ties in, I guess, with your answer just now.
Yeah, I think it's the same answer as yeah, absolutely. We want to, we want to spark innovation in wholesale banking, and absolutely we want to work with cool and innovative companies that want to provide use cases to the banks. We'll need to get a payment system live first, though. I think.
A question from Giuseppe Bertone: what do you think about second layer technologies based on, well, second layer scaling technologies based on ZK rollups? Do you think they can be good alternatives to private permission blockchains for Finality?
Yeah, I mean, ZK rollup. But adding privacy and adding second layers on top make a lot of sense in some ways. I think you could use it as an alternative to obfuscate data in some respects. But for us, the key with using the IBFT protocol is its similarity to the legal requirements or the legal settlement finality laws, which make it actually easier for us to link to that. So we can't be a payment system unless we can prove that we can get to legal settlement finality, and IBFT is the thing that for us is the key there.
From Rohit Tandon, he says, I know it was there, but how do you ensure all nodes are created equal, and can talk about onboarding in the same context so you don't have master nodes as such?
Yeah, so we're using the IBFT protocol for consensus, so it's obviously it's proof of authority. We will manage a validator set to ensure that no one of the participants can run more than 33% of the validation nodes, indeed they will have to certify their nodes against our network to make sure that they're running them in a sensible way, and we will have to manage to make sure that no one can effectively take over the network in that respect.
And a follow-on question before I jump back to Mo's, Ayman Kampori saying, when deciding the maximum share of the validator nodes, what made you choose 33%?
Makes good question. So IBFT effectively, if 33% of the nodes go rogue or start to do something different, then the actual validation process stops. So you're not able to actually affect anything bad on the network, but you do stop the network from working. So we don't want a rogue to be able to do that. So we keep it, we keep the actual number of validators that any one organization can run to a minimum.
A question from Moel Shami: do you see clearinghouses becoming participants in the Finality network?
It's a good question. I think so. In time, they may very well be building platforms that sit on top of the Finality payment system and using it as payment rails. But time will see. I think that's not on our roadmap at the moment.
It's all the questions in the chat. I've got one that's, I guess, probably more topical, given, and that's more about the links to the public blockchains, and with the work that's happening with stable coins, and this kind of big push towards these payment providers and so on starting to accept them. There's certain parts of the financial system starting to plumb that in. It sounds, of course, like it's something that's definitely not on the radar at the moment, but do you envisage a future where at some point that may become more relevant, having some sort of rails there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we will watch that space with interest. I mean, certainly for now, because this is what we're talking about here is fiat currency and central bank money. It's the access to it is a lot narrower in scope than commercial bank money. So trying to be a payment system in that way, we are meeting some quite stringent regulations. I think we'll see what time brings, and whether we look like we can open up to the public networks in a more meaningful way as the legislation becomes clear.
Another question, this time from Osman again. You're funded by 15 banks and financial institutions. Do you only benefit them, or Finality Global Global Payments can benefit globally?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So we know the idea being that this will, as time goes on and the regulations allowed, we will open up access to central bank money. So we're hoping to grow the participant list, not just those 15 organisations, but they're seed funders, they're shareholders today, and they'll be the first participants of our payment system. But no, absolutely, we want to grow this as wide and as big as we can into as many currencies and participants as we can over time.
If everyone can extend like a virtual round of applause for Adam and his talk here, I think if you ever need ammunition on why you should choose Ethereum and what use cases are well supported by it, it's such a great example here. And yeah, thank you so much, Adam. It's been really great to have you talk here.
Thank you, Clarke.
Next month's meetup is happening on March the 31st at 5 p.m. So in terms of next month's meetup, Marley Gray was along with York Rhodes at Microsoft. They were the two people who got Microsoft doing things with blockchain. So it was a good few years back now, but he's been very involved in this space for a long time, driving a lot of the blockchain agenda at Microsoft. And then we also have Carl Thomas as well. So Carl Thomas is the founder and CEO of Provide. Provide actually offer a blockchain as a service platform, but also this native baseline as a platform service too, which Daniel mentioned earlier on today. And they're doing some really interesting stuff. And they're also currently undertaking a project with Coke One North America, which is the largest distributor of Coca-Cola in North America. So it's a really fascinating project. They were using Hyperledger Fabric for their first proof of concept. They're now looking at Baseline for their second. So it's going to be awesome having Carl to talk more about this as well, because he's been very close to the ground on it. Also, if you want to have a listen to the new podcast and vlog that recently launched, This Week in Blockchain, you can check that out at weekinblockchain.com. I'm also hosting a Clubhouse session on Mondays at 5 p.m. GMT, 12 p.m. Eastern, to actually discuss what's happening there too. So if you're interested in joining that or need a Clubhouse invite to get involved, please reach out to me via LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever else. Thanks everyone, and we'll catch you again in a month.